New Jersey, land of diners, beaches, and ancient mysteries. From ancient stone circles hidden in the woods, to strange carvings no one can explain. This isn't your typical history lesson. Is it Native American legacy, colonial secrets, or something even older? You're about to discover the hidden side of the Garden State. Welcome to Ancient Mysteries in New Jersey. Let's dig deep. The Lapstone. Imagine unearthing something in your own backyard that could rewrite history. Something that calls into question everything we think we know about who lived in New Jersey tens of thousands of years ago. That's the weight behind the mystery of the Lapstone. It's small, just a few inches long, but its implications are massive. Back in the 1870s, a farmer named Barnard Hansel was plowing his fields in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, just across the river from New Jersey. He turned over a rock, not particularly impressive at first glance, but when he cleaned it off, he noticed strange carvings etched into its surface. That rock would come to be known as the Lapstone, and what was carved into it is what blew everyone's mind. A scene that seemed to depict a Native American man spearing what looked unmistakably like a woolly mammoth. Now hang on a second, woolly mammoths went extinct in North America over 10,000 years ago. And while we know humans were here around that time, very little direct evidence links them to the region. In a way this explicit, this carving wasn't just abstract. It showed details, distinct tusks, spears, even a kind of group hunting scene. To some, it looked like prehistoric art. To others, it looked like a hoax. For decades, scholars, archaeologists, skeptics, and enthusiasts have debated this artifact's authenticity. Some say it's the most groundbreaking evidence of early human life in the Middle. Others claim it was faked in the 1800s, perhaps by someone who wanted attention, or maybe even by Hansel himself. But the story gets even weirder. The stone was actually found in two pieces. Hansel dug up the first half and set it aside. About a year later, he found the second half in the same field, and when he put them together, they fit perfectly. That's where people started to raise eyebrows. It seemed a little too convenient. If someone had hoaxed the whole thing, they would have had to carve two matching pieces of stone, plant them in the field a year apart, and trust that they'd be discovered in the correct order. That's a long con for a farmer in the 19th century. But there's another theory. What if the stone really is authentic? What if thousands of years ago, the ancestors of the late people witnessed the last mammoths roaming through the ancient forests and river valleys of what we now call New Jersey and Pennsylvania? What if they recorded that memory on stone the way other early peoples did on cave walls? The implications are staggering. It would mean that not only were these people present during the Ice Age, but they were creating art, telling stories, and passing down knowledge visually, not just as an inhabited area, but as a cradle of prehistoric culture. Now, let's talk about the style of the carving itself. Critics argue that the imagery looks suspiciously like the kind of popular illustrations you do see in the 1800s when mammoths were being rediscovered and sensationalized in books and museums. There's something about the line work, the posture of the figures, the way the mammoth is drawn that feels more 19th century than Paleolithic. Supporters of the stone say, hold on, maybe we just don't know what early American petroglyphs really looked like. After all, there's very little surviving stone art from this region because of erosion, weather, and lack of preservation. Maybe this was just a rare lucky find. And then there's the late connection. The tribe's oral history goes back millennia. And while they don't speak of mammoths explicitly, they do have ancient stories about large animals, ancestral migrations, and deep ties to the land. If the stone was carved by a proto-Inuit or a related culture, it would add weight to those oral traditions, showing that the stories have roots in lived experience, not just myth. Of course, no mystery is complete without a twist. The lapistone didn't just disappear into a museum collection. Clippily, it bounced around between collectors, skeptics, and showmen. At one point, it was displayed alongside other curiosities, as if it were more sideshow than science. And the more people handled it, the more degraded it became. Some even claimed it had been altered, touched up, recarved, possibly damaged. That makes any modern-day authentication that much harder. What started as a potential Rosetta Stone of North American prehistory is now a worn relic wrapped in suspicion. But let's step back and consider this. Even if the last stone were faked, it tells a story about what people wanted to believe at the time. That Native Americans had a deep ancient past tied to megafauna. That the land we now live on has secrets buried just beneath the surface. That the past isn't as far away as we think. Whether it's real or not, The stone forces us to confront one of the biggest questions in archaeology. How much of history do we really know? And how much are we just guessing based on the fragments that survived? The Labstone now lives in the Mercer Museum in Doylestown, where it sits behind glass, quietly staring back at the doubters and the dreamers alike. People still come to see it. They still argue. They still lean in and squint, trying to make out the curves of the tusks, the shapes of the spears, the story frozen in slate, because deep down, we all want it to be true. That just may be right here in the shadow of New Jersey's rivers and forests. Someone once knelt with a stone in hand and carved a memory of a creature long gone, leaving behind a message for a future that would almost miss it entirely. The Clinton Road phenomena. You're driving down a narrow two-lane road. The forest presses in on both sides like a wall of shadows, dense and silent. There are no streetlights, no cell signal, and barely a hint of civilization. Just blacktop, trees, and the feeling that something or someone is watching. Welcome to Clinton Road, one of the most bizarre, fierce-soaked, and legendary stretches of pavement in the United States. This road cuts through West Milford in Posea County, New Jersey. It's just about 10 miles long, but what it lacks in length, it makes up for in lore. Ask anyone from northern New Jersey, and they'll have a story about ghost sightings, cults, phantom vehicles, creatures, or strange magnetic phenomena. The deeper you dig, the more surreal it gets. Let's start with the big one, the Ghost Boy Bridge. Locals will tell you to stop your car at one of the small bridges along Clinton Road, especially one near a sharp curve and a narrow shoulder. They say if you throw a coin over the edge, just a simple coin, into the water below, something strange happens. Leave it, wait a moment, and it comes back. People claim a ghost boy, the spirit of a child who drowned long ago, returns the coin to anyone who disrespects his spot. Some even say they've felt something brush against their hand as they reached out over the railing. Others say they've seen ripples in the water or heard a splash, despite there being no animals, no people, and no breeze. Now imagine you've just left that bridge, heart pounding a little, maybe laughing it off. But the road ahead isn't giving you a break. You look in your rearview mirror, and suddenly headlights appear out of nowhere. Not just normal headlights, high beams, bright, aggressive, tailgating you even though you were completely alone a minute ago. This is what people call the phantom car. It'll chase you for miles, hugging your bumper, pressuring you to drive faster. Then, just when you think you're about to get run off the road, nothing. The lights vanish. No turnoffs, no tire sounds, no vehicle, like it was never there. And that's just the surface level stuff. Deeper in the woods, some visitors swear they've seen hooded figures. Not once, not twice. Enough times that stories have piled up since the 70s about Clinton Road being a hotspot for occult activity. It's said that groups, possibly cults, gather around the ruins of an old building deep in the forest called Cross Castle, built in the early 1900s. Cross Castle was once a grand stone structure overlooking the woods. Now it's a burned-out ruin covered in graffiti and moss. But people say it's more than just a party spot for teenagers. Some claim rituals take place there, dark ones, and anyone who enters might feel intense dread, headaches, or get this missing time. People have come out of the woods thinking they were inside for 10 minutes only to find out it was hours. But not all the mysteries here are supernatural. Some are ancient. Native American legends talk about the forests in this region being spirit-haunted, avoided even by seasoned warriors and hunters. According to some tales, the spirits in the Clinton Road woods aren't just ghosts. They're elemental forces tied to the land itself. You'll hear whispers that the Lenape tribes believe the area was a crossing point. A kind of spiritual threshold where the veil between worlds thinned, where you could lose your way, not just in space, but in time. Some believe this might be why the road is prone to these strange time skips and surreal phenomena, that the road did uncreate the mystery, it just exposed it. And then there's the legend of the strange animals. Multiple reports over the years mention creatures that defy explanation. Not bears, not deer rear-rocking hybrids, like a wolf with glowing eyes and unusually long limbs seen darting across the road late at night, or a humanoid figure that crouches like an animal then stands up and disappears into the trees. Skeptics chalk these up to misidentification or panic-fueled hallucinations. But when you hear the same description from multiple people who have never met, it gets harder to ignore. Then there's Dead Man's Curve. This sharp bend, near the southern end of Clinton Road, is the site of more than a few tragic accidents. Drivers have misjudged the curve, ending up off the road and into the trees. But here's where it gets strange. Some of the survivors have said they felt something pull their steering wheel, or that their brakes didn't respond right before the crash. A few even claimed they saw someone or something on the road just before impact. A figure in white standing in the middle of the curve. Gone in a blink, still not creeped out. Try this one. There is a spot where your car parked in neutral on a very slight incline will start rolling uphill. People have tested it dozens of times. Levelers, GPS, slope apps, you name it. The car appears to defy gravity. Some say it's an optical illusion. Others say it's the ghost boy again trying to push people to safety. Or maybe it's something older, something deeper, and we haven't even talked about the bodies. In the 1980s, a notorious mob hitman named Richard the Iceman Klinsky confessed to dumping victims in the woods off Clinton Road. Real-life bodies, not just urban legends. Police confirmed at least one of those claims. That alone adds a chilling edge to every other story, because now not every scream in the night can be brushed off as imagination. Not every shadow is harmless. Even the wildlife seems off. Locals will tell you about a weird silence that falls when you drive deep enough. No crickets, no birds, not even the rustle of squirrels in the leaves. Just dead silence. The kind that feels thick, artificial, wrong. And then there's the sudden fog. One moment clear, next moment your headlights are bouncing off dense mist. Even when the rest of the state is sunny and blue. And it's not just people with wild imaginations seeing this stuff. Police officers, EMTs, even delivery drivers have their own Clinton Road stories. Some won't drive it at night. Others refuse to pull over anywhere along it ever. But maybe the most unnerving part of Clint Road isn't the ghosts, the cults, or the phantom vehicles. Maybe it's how the road feels like a place out of step with the rest of the world. Like you're driving through someone else's dream or nightmare. The air feels heavier. Time feels looser. And even if you don't believe in spirits or ancient curses, you can't deny that something's off. You feel it in your bones, whether it's a psychic scar from centuries of forgotten rituals, an accidental portal carved into the woods, or just a long road with too much history. Clinton Road gets under your skin. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to shake the feeling that the road is watching you right back. The Indian Head Rock, Sussex County. Drive north through Sussex County, New Jersey, and you'll find yourself surrounded by sweeping ridges, deep-cut valleys, and quiet forests that haven't changed much in centuries. But tucked into this natural scenery is something truly strange, something that seems to watch silently from its stony perch. Locals call it Indian Head Rock. And once you see it, it's impossible to forget. It's not a statue. It's not carved by human hands. At least that's what they say. Indian Head Rock is a massive weathered stone formation on the side of a hill near the Appalachian Trail. What makes it eerie is how shockingly human it looks. A large profile juts from the rock face, strong brow, prominent nose, lips set in a stoic expression, and what could be long hair flowing back along the rock surface. From certain angles, it looks just like the face of a Native American elder gazing eternally across the valley below. And sure, you could say it's just a coincidence, a fluke of erosion, nature making shapes like it always does. But when you stand in front of it in the quiet, surrounded by towering trees and the breath of ancient wind, you feel something heavier, like this wasn't an accident. Indigenous oral tradition supports that feeling. The Lenape people lived across this region for thousands of years, long before colonial maps were drawn. Their stories speak of sacred stones, spirits of the land, and watching guardians that protect certain hills and paths. While there's no written record tying Indian Head Rock to a specific legend, local tribal members have long held the area to be significant. Elders have said the face is more than just rock. It's a symbol of memory, a sentinel. There's a theory, one whispered more than spoken, that the rock isn't entirely natural, that maybe at some point, long before the Europeans arrived, someone did shape it, not with iron tools or chisels, but with fire, water, and stone. Slow, methodical, ritualistic shaping. Centuries before the first written word hit this soil. It's not impossible. Across the Americas, ancient peoples created petroglyphs, mounds, and monuments, some of which are only now being recognized for their full meaning. But even if no hand ever touched Indian Head Rock, the effect it has on people is very real. Hikers report strange feelings when they approach. A sudden shift in energy, a drop in temperature, animals grow quiet, phones glitch, and the face, no matter what time of day, always seems to catch the light in just the right way. Shadowed at dawn, glowing at sunset, always watching. There's another twist to this mystery, one that only makes things weirder. Aerial scans of the area done in the last few decades show unusual geometric patterns on the forest floor nearby. Lines, shallow mounds, and possible stone alignments that don't seem to follow any natural logic. They're not trails. They're not erosion. Some believe these might have been ancient gathering spots, calendar markers, or even ceremonial grounds centering around the rock itself. A few amateur archaeologists have gone so far as to suggest Indian Headrock is part of a larger complex, a kind of forgotten indigenous temple district woven into the landscape. No buildings, no walls, just shapes, energies, and alignments created to honor ancestors or track celestial events. It's speculative, sure, but not impossible. Indigenous cultures all over North America use stone and land in sophisticated ways we're only beginning to understand. But this rock also carries warnings. Not the kind with signs or fences. Those you can ignore. These are older, more personal people who have disrespected the area, climbed the face, or vandalized nearby boulders, have reported bad luck that follows them home. Mechanical failures, sudden illness, personal trigger. It could be coincidence, sure. Or maybe it's just the curse of guilt. But stories like this persist enough that even curious skeptics approach Indian Headrock with quiet steps. Then there are the dreams. This part's harder to explain. Some who camp nearby say they've had vivid, overwhelming dreams the night after seeing the rock. Not nightmares exactly, but intense visions, firelight flickering on stone, of drums in the distance, of faces in the trees. Some people wake up convinced they heard voices in a language they don't know. Some wake up crying, others don't sleep at all. One Hiku swore he saw the face change, subtly, but undeniably. He said it was a shift in the jaw, like the mouth was opening. He left in the middle of the night and never went back. It looked like it was trying to speak, he said, like it had been silent too long. Of course, there are those who try to debunk it. Geologists explain the shape as pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to see faces in random patterns like clouds or wood grain or rock faces. They'll say the ridge formed due to wind erosion and free-thaw cycles. That it's just a coincidence that it resembles a human figure. But for the people who've seen it up close, that explanation rings hollow, because it's not just the shape, it's the feeling. You don't just see Indian Headrock. You feel seen by it. Like something ancient is staring through you. Not with malice, not even with judgment, just presence. Quiet, massive presence. Even if no hand ever shaped it, even if no sacred rite was ever performed there, even if every single legend is just poetic invention, Indian Headrock still stands as a reminder. A reminder that the land holds memory. That long before suburbs and highways, before surveyors and settlers, there were people here who saw meaning in stone, in shadow, in silence. And maybe, just maybe, they left a piece of that meaning behind. Not in a museum, but in a hill where time moves slower and faces still form in the rock. So next time you're in Sussex County, keep your eyes on the rich lines. If you see a profile staring back at you from the trees, don't look away too fast. It might be watching for a reason. The Ramapo Mountain people. There's a stretch of dense wild forest running through northern New Jersey into southern New York. Rugged ridges, tangled trees, and misty lakes, especially around the Ramapo Mountains. It's beautiful, quiet, and remote. But for centuries, whispers have come out of these woods about a secretive group of people who live tucked away from the rest of the world. They're not ghosts, not monsters, but the mystery around them is just as deep. They're called the Ramapo Mountain people, and their origins have baffled historians, folklorists, and locals alike. If you've never heard of them, that's no accident. They've been called many things. The Jackson Whites, the Mountain People, even the Pine Eyes of the North. But these names don't really do justice to who they are or the complexity of their story. Because this isn't just a mystery about people living in the woods. This is about identity, ancestry, and how forgotten history can linger like smoke through the trees. The Ramapo Mountain people live or lived in some cases in scattered enclaves around Ringwood, Mawa, and the Whale Reservoir area. Some families traced their presence in the region back centuries, long before there were paved roads or street signs. And from the start, they didn't quite fit into any easy category. Their skin tone confused early census takers. Their language mixed English with unusual words and accents. They lived separately, rarely mingling with outsiders, and developed a culture that was uniquely their own. So, who were they? Ask 10 people, and you'll get 10 different stories. Some say they're the descendants of Native Americans, mainly Leap, who hid in the hills to avoid colonial violence. Others claim they were the children of freed slaves who escaped north and intermarried with native tribes. Still others believe they were tied to Dutch settlers or Hessian soldiers who deserted the British Army during the Revolutionary War and vanished into the wilderness. And then there's the most controversial version, that they're descended from all of the above, a blend of Leap, African American, and European outcasts who came together in the Ramapo Mountains to form a kind of hidden society. That S, where the mystery deepens because no one is quite sure how they started. And no single origin story fully explains the group's distinct features and practices. Their communities were tightly knit, often composed of just a few families intermarrying over generations. Outsiders called it inbreeding. Insiders called it survival. Over time, they developed a kind of internal mythology about who they were, where they came from, and why they stayed away from the rest of the world. Some of the old-timers told stories about being chased off their ancestral lands. Others spoke of spirits in the mountains that guided and protected their people. They lived in cabins and shacks, fished the lakes, hunted the woods, and carved out a life that, while poor by modern standards, was rich in resilience. But the outside world never left them alone. In the early 1900s, as the state began building reservoirs and expanding infrastructure, Ramapo families found themselves evicted from their land. The state wanted the water, the people not so much. Some were pushed deeper into the woods, others stayed in fading enclaves, clinging to their traditions. Even as society moved on around them, and because they didn't look or act like their suburban neighbors, rumors started to swirl. The stories got darker. People said they were inbred, said they were dangerous, said they'd shoot at trespassers or steal children. Horror movies even picked up on the stereotypes. If you've ever seen a backwoods thriller with a creepy, isolated family, there's a good chance it drew on the myths about the Ramapo mountain people. But the truth, it's far more human and far more heartbreaking. These were people pushed to the margins by generations of racism, poverty, and erasure. Yet, they held on to their culture, their ancestry, and their land with incredible tenacity. And here is where the ancient mystery creeps back in. Because some members of the community have claimed knowledge passed down through generations. Stories about spirits in the mountain, sacred stones, old trails used for ritual. They talk about the old ones and describe teachings that sound eerily like lay oral traditions. And still, no official historical account can fully map it out. Every time someone tries to trace the family trees, the records blur, census data goes missing, names change, people disappear from documents. It's as if the history itself resists being captured, like it was meant to stay in the hills. In the 1970s and 80s, the community began organizing, asserting their identity as the Ramapo Nation, claiming their rightful place as a native tribe with deep roots in the area. But recognition hasn't come easy. The federal government has refused to acknowledge them as a sovereign nation, citing inconsistent records and lack of documentation. Many tribal members believe this is a direct result of centuries of systemic erasure, and an unwillingness to confront the truth that New Jersey has had an indigenous presence all along, hidden in plain sight. And what about their knowledge of the land? Elders within the community have described unusual places in the mountains, spots where compasses go haywire, where the air feels thick and strange, where ancient petroglyphs hide under moss and lichen. They say some stones up there shouldn't be where they are, that some caves echo with voices that the land remembers. One legend speaks of a stone circle hidden deep in the woods, older than anyone alive, said to be a place of power, only visited on certain nights when the moon is right. Outsiders scoff, but no one's ever proven it doesn't exist. Even today, people hiking through the Ramapos sometimes stumble into areas where GPS cuts out and the silence gets unnaturally deep. Some report seeing flickers in the trees, shapes, flashes of movement, maybe people watching, and when they try to take photos, nothing shows up. The shots come back black or washed out. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the Ramapo mountain people still keep their secrets. It's not that they don't want to be known, it's that they want to be understood on their terms. Not as myths, not as villains, not as curiosities, but as descendants of something ancient. As people who have always been here, long before highways, long before colonial borders, long before New Jersey was New Jersey. They are a mystery, not because they are hiding, but because the world refused to see them for so long. And now that their voice is rising, that story is finally starting to be heard. The Devil's Tree, Bernard's Township, tucked in the quiet suburbs of Bernards Township, New Jersey, surrounded by colonial homes, parks. It doesn't look like much at first, just an old tree with null bark and a crooked silhouette. But ask anyone in town and they'll tell you it's no ordinary tree. They'll lower their voices, they'll glance over their shoulders, and they'll call it by the name that has haunted this region for generations. The devilish tree. It stands alone and it wants to be alone. That's what people say. The legend goes deep, deeper than the roots of the tree itself. There are multiple versions, each darker than the last, but they all agree on one thing. This tree carries a curse, a real one. And whether you believe in spirits, demons, or just bad energy, the Devil's Tree dares you to test it. Let's start with the most well-known story. According to local legend, this tree was once the site of horrific acts, lynchings, hangings, not just once, but many times over many years. Some versions tie it to the Ku Klux Klan, claiming the area was once a gathering place for secret meetings and executions. Others say the tree itself became a magnet for death, a place where hopeless souls went to end their lives. People claim to have seen news hanging from its limbs, heard the creak of rope on windless nights, seen shadows swing. Then there's the tale of the farmer. This one's told in hushed tones by older residents. They say a local man, perhaps after losing his family in a tragic accident, walked out to the tree one winter morning and hanged himself from one of its limbs. But before he died, he made a vow that no tree, no person, no land would find peace after what he'd lost. He cursed the ground, and ever since, anyone who tries to harm the Devil's Tree, cut it, carve into it, even insult it, finds tragedy waiting for them. That farmer's spirit, they say, still clings to the tree like a shadow on the bark. People have tried, they've tried. Over the years, countless daredevils have gone out to the tree at night to prove it's just superstition. Some bring hatchets or chainsaws. They never succeed. Watch like the tree knows. There's even a local rumor about a pickup truck. An old Ita, the tool breaks. The gas runs out or something, someone stops them. A few report the hands locking up. Others say the air gets cold. Their vision blurs. Their hearts race like they're being black vehicle with no plates that appears when someone gets too close. It'll chase them down the road, engine roaring until they reach the highway. Then it's just gone. No more taillights. No more tear marks. Just empty road and the sound of your pulse pounding in your ears. And what about physical signs? They're there. Touch the tree on a summer day and they say, it feels cold. Colder than the air around it. Even in full sun, its trunk seems to reject warmth. Snow refuses to pile around its base. Animals won't nest in its branches. Birds steer clear. Not a single vine has grown up its side. No fungus, no moss, just bark, twisted, cracked, and dry like it's dead, but not allowed to fall. Some people claim to have heard whispers near it. Not voices, not words, just the suggestion of breath, the hiss that moves through the grass when everything else is still. Others have experienced equipment failures, phones shutting off, cameras glitching, batteries draining in minutes. One paranormal investigator brought a brand new EMF meter out to the tree and watched it spike, max out, then die completely. But not every story is about ghosts. Some are older, deeper. There is a theory that the tree stands on ground once used by the Lenape people for sacred or ceremonial purposes, either as a site of burial or boundary. Over time, when colonists took the land, they desecrated the site, built over it, cleared it, but the tree remained somehow rooted in the old ways. Not sacred anymore, just angry, cursed, a scar on the land that couldn't be healed. And that brings us to the silence. If you visit the Devil's Tree, especially at dusk, you'll notice something strange. The wind changes, the birds stop, even the insects seem to disappear. It's not quiet like a peaceful park, it's dead quiet. The kind that makes your skin tighten and your instincts scream at you to leave. It doesn't matter if you're skeptical, your body knows. It reacts to something primal in the air, something ancient, something that wants to be left alone. Over time, the township got involved. People were getting too close, spray painting the tree, taking pieces of bark as souvenirs, testing the legends. So, the town erected a fence, a low metal barrier meant to keep the curious at bay, But that fence didn't stop the stories. In fact, it made them worse. People started saying the fence wasn't just for protection. It was containment. That whatever lives in the tree or beneath it needs to be kept there. And then there are the dreams. Yes. Again, just like with Indian Head Rock, the Devil's Tree seems to leave a mark not just on the land, but on the mind. People who visit it report intense dreams afterward of being hanged, of choking, of dark woods with no end. Some wake up with bruises on their necks. No explanation, no memory, just the tree lodged in their subconscious like a splinter. A few locals have taken it upon themselves to watch the tree. They don't consider themselves ghost hunters. They just know something's wrong with that field. One man claims he drives by every night just to make sure the tree is still there. He says he's seen lights in the branches, glowing, flickering like fireflies, but white, unnatural. He doesn't stop. He just watches like it's his job, like he has no choice. And maybe that's the Devil's Tree's true power. Not the legends, not the curses, but the pull. The way it lingers in your thoughts long after you've left. The way it roots itself in your brain, just like it rooted itself in the earth, refusing to die, refusing to let go. You don't just visit the Devil's Tree, you carry it home with you. So, if you ever find yourself driving through Bernard S. Township and you see a lone lifeless oak standing in a wide empty field, don't stop. Don't touch the fence. Don't challenge it. Because whether you believe the legends or not, the tree doesn't care. It's been watching for a long, long time. The East Creek Stone Circle. It lies beneath the surface, half forgotten, half denied, hidden in the murky waters off the southern coast of New Jersey, near the sleepy stretches of Cape May County. This isn't a place that draws attention. No flashing signs, no historical markers, just the cold tidal channels of East Creek winding through marshes and out into the Delaware Bay. But somewhere down there, if the stories are true, rests a structure that shouldn't exist. A formation that could rewrite what we know about early American history. They call it the East Creek Stone Circle. And its existence remains as foggy and elusive as the coastal mornings that roll over this forgotten corner of the state. The story begins in whispers shared by fishermen, divers, and old-timers who grew up poking around these waters. They speak of a ring of stones, evenly spaced, settled deep in the mud, just off the creek's mouth. Not a random scatter, not erosion, a circle, big, ancient, and impossible to explain. For years, it was nothing more than local rumor. Something you might hear at a bait shop or around a campfire after a few beers. But then someone started comparing it to Michigan's underwater stone circle in Lake Michigan. That one's real, discovered by sonar, showing signs of deliberate placement and even carvings. If something like that could exist in the Great Lakes, then why not here along the Atlantic? According to divers who've claimed to see it, the East Creek stones form a ring about 30 to 40 feet in diameter. Each stone stands between 3 and 5 feet tall, partially buried in the silty bottom, weathered, but clearly placed. Not tossed by waves, not dropped from a boat. Placed. One diver described the sensation of being near them as like walking into a church underwater. The pressure shifts, the sound dims, everything slows. You feel eyes that aren't there, not malevolent but old, watching, waiting. If true, the implications are massive. These waters were once dry land thousands of years ago during the last ice age. Sea levels were lower, and much of what's now New Jersey's coast was forest and field. Paleontologians lived here, hunted here, moved in small groups along the rivers and ridges. Could they have created this circle? If so, for what purpose? There's no evidence that early indigenous cultures in this area built megalithic structures. At least nothing that survived. But that's the thing. So little has survived. The pine barrens and coastal marshes are brutal on artifacts, wood rots, soil shifts. Entire villages could disappear without a trace. And if you consider the massive storms, floods, and geological changes over the past 10,000 years, the idea of a sacred stone site slipping beneath the tides isn't crazy. It's inevitable. And then there's the alignments. One amateur researcher claims the East Creek stones are positioned in a pattern that matches the sun's position during the summer solstice sunrise, just like Stonehenge. It's speculative, of course. There's no university study, no official sonar map released to the public, but the few divers who've seen it say the orientation isn't random, that at certain times of year sunlight cuts through the water at just the right angle to light up the center of the ring. Other stories go even deeper, literally and figuratively. A few divers have returned, saying they felt disoriented within the circle, not from currents or pressure, but from something harder to name. One man claimed his compass began to spin wildly. Another said his air gauge malfunctioned the moment he passed into the circle's edge, only to return to normal once he swam out. Whether it's magnetic anomalies, gas pockets, or something else, the effect is consistent enough to raise eyebrows. And just like so many other mysterious sites, there are stories of dreams. People who visit the nearby shoreline, especially those who sleep near the creek, have reported intense, vivid dreams after just one night. Visions of flickering firelight reflected on water, tall figures moving between the stones, strange chants that seem to echo inside their heads even after they wake. Some say they dream of drowning, even if they've never feared water before. Others dream of being watched by something just beneath the waves. Patient, silent, ancient. The indigenous angle is both fascinating and complex. The Leip, the original stewards of this land, do have stories about sacred waters, spirits, stones, and rituals tied to the cycles of the moon and sun. They respected certain landscapes deeply, believing some held openings to the spirit world. While there's no documented connection between the Lenape and a submerged stone circle, it's not hard to imagine earlier cultures, predecessors perhaps, marking places of power in similar ways. But some say the circle isn't Lenape at all. Here's where the theories spiral. Some believe the East Creek Formation predates all known human presence in the area. They point to the idea of a lost pre-Ice Age civilization, something wiped out by rising seas, remembered only through oral traditions and half-buried legends. Could there have been a seafaring culture in the ancient Atlantic, placing monolithic stones long before the land disappeared? Most archaeologists would scoff. But then again, they scoffed at Troy before someone found it. They scoffed at Gagipi until it rewrote the timeline of human civilization, and there's one last layer. An old legend from Cape May County speaks of the ring of stones that sang. It appears only in fragments, usually in colonial-era accounts of Lenape oral tales. The story goes that once a year the stones would call the fire from the sky, and light would ripple across the water. The tribe would gather, make offerings, and leave without looking back. When asked by settlers where the ring was, the Lenape reportedly said, "It is under the tide now. You cannot walk there anymore." Coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. The East Creek Stone Circle remains unconfirmed. No academic team has officially studied it. The area is difficult to access. Tides are dangerous. Visibility is poor. And whether through bureaucracy or willful silence, the few who've seen it aren't talking much. Some say it's being protected. Others say it's being covered up. One thing's for sure. If it exists, it's one of New Jersey's oldest mysteries. A reminder that beneath even the most ordinary shorelines, there may be secrets older than the state, the country, or even the people who first named the land. Secrets still waiting to be heard when the tide is low and the water holds its breath. Hat, the first interdimensional portal. If you're ever driving through the Pine Barrens in southern New Jersey and you pass a broken down road sign that says Hat, you might be tempted to laugh. It sounds like the title of a children's book, or maybe a diner that sells overpriced pie. But that name, Munjestat, has become the center of one of the most bizarre and enduring legends in modern American folklore. Because, according to some people, this forgotten ghost town isn't just a blip on an old map. It's the location of the first interdimensional portal on Earth. Yeah, you heard that right. The story of Ung's Hat is where conspiracy theory, internet culture, quantum physics, and New Jersey weirdness all collide. And the craziest part, it started as a game, until it didn't. Let's rewind. Ung's Hat was a real place once. A small, scrappy settlement named after, yes, a man named Zenon, who allegedly threw his fancy silk hat into the air where it landed on a tree and got stuck. Nobody's sure if that's true, but the name stuck, and Ung's Hat appeared on maps as early as the 1700s. It never grew into a real town, just a scattering of cabins in the pines. By the early 20th century, it had completely disappeared, reclaimed by the forest. But around the 1980s, the legend was reborn. Pamphlets began to appear in underground bookstores and mailer designs. They had cryptic titles like Incinabula, a catalog of rare books, and contained what looked like government documents, strange timelines, and academic writing on alternate dimensions. It all pointed back to one thing: Ung's Hat, New Jersey. According to the files, sometime in the 1970s, a group of rogue scientists, physicists, philosophers, and counterculture thinkers set up a secret compound in the Pine Barrens. They called themselves the Institute for Chaos Studies and were experimenting with cutting-edge theories about consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the multiverse. Their goal to reach a state of awareness so profound that it could literally shift reality, not just in your mind, but physically, spatially. The centerpiece of their work was something called the egg, not a literal egg, but a strange capsule-shaped device they built deep in the woods. It was supposed to amplify human consciousness, something between a sensory deprivation tank and a quantum accelerator. When used properly, it could allegedly transport a person to another dimension. According to the documents, the experiment worked. One of the researchers reportedly entered the egg, focused as consciousness, and vanished. Moments later, he returned, confused, shaken, but alive. He claimed he'd been somewhere else, a parallel Earth similar to ours, but not quite. The sky was a slightly different shade. The gravity felt off. Civilization was different, stripped down, tribal, advanced in ways that didn't make sense. He said he met people there, spoke with them, walked through their world, and that's when everything spiraled. The institute continued its experiments, sending more people through. They called the place they discovered Mojave 2, and eventually a small group chose to stay there permanently. They believed our world was doomed by war, pollution, collapse, and that this alternate Earth offered a second chance. From there, the legend fractured. Some versions say the government found out and shut the program down hard. That agents stormed the facility, confiscated everything, and silenced the survivors. Others claim the portal still exists, buried in the pines, covered by leaves and sand. You just have to find it. And some says HAT is still active, but not in this dimension. That if you walk the right trail at the right time under the right stars, you'll slip through without even knowing it. But here's the twist. The Incanabula papers were planted. Joseph Matheny, the man behind the original documents, admitted years later that it all began as an experimental storytelling project, a kind of proto alternate reality game designed to test how myth spreads. He wanted to see if he could create a modern urban legend from scratch using flyers, websites, obscure radio broadcasts, and word of mouth. It worked better than he ever imagined. The story of Ang's hat spread like wildfire across the early internet. Forums lit up, conspiracy theorists latched on. Paranormal investigators caked into the barrens with compasses and Geiger counters. People swore they'd found strange readings, heard bizarre sounds at night, seen flickering lights moving through the trees. Even after Matheny confessed, the legend kept growing because by then people didn't care if it was real. They believed or they wanted to. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Ang's hat was never just a hoax. Maybe it became something else, something alive. People brought their own truths to it, their own fears, hopes, and curiosities. It wasn't about if there was a portal. It was about why we so badly want one to exist. A door to a better world, a shortcut out of this one. Besides, who's to say it's all fake? Matan himself has been coy in recent years. He admits to starting the legend, but not to inventing every detail. Some of the names, some of the places, some of the technology, he says, came from sources he won't identify. He hints that maybe the story he told wasn't fiction at all, but camouflage, a way to make the truth look like a game. Because what better way to hide a secret than in plain sight? And then there's the Pine Barrens themselves. A vast, eerie forest, covering over 1 million acres, thick with fog, tangled with trails that lead nowhere. It's already full of legends like the Jersey Devil, the Blue Hole, and the glowing orbs that drift through the woods without sound or source. So when people say they feel time distorted out there, that GPS fails, that the same trail leads them in circles, well, maybe it's not just the trees playing tricks. Maybe reality is thin in places. Maybe Ang's hat marks one of them. Even now, decades later, hikers will find faded symbols carved into tree bark, QR codes spray-painted under bridges, broken radios buried under pine needles. Some are pranks, some aren't, so is early explained. You can still download the Incanabula documents online. People still comb through them like sacred texts, chasing clues and coordinates and ancient esoteric symbols. And maybe someday someone will step into the egg for real. Not a story, not a game, just a person staring into the void, daring it to blink back. So, if you ever find yourself in the Pine Barrens, alone and off trail, and the air feels too quiet, and the sky suddenly looks wrong, don't panic. Maybe you just found Ang's hat.